Oh my God, what an insufferable this guy is.
Do not underestimate epidemiology.
Harvard says red meat is worse than junk food. Therefore, they must be correct.
I don't remember ever being actually shocked by a nutrition.
Oh God, do I really have to sit through this? This patronizing, haughty, arrogant words and opinions, this feigned humility. We're just getting started.
Before, and I've read more than 100 nutrition books and more landmark nutrition studies.
Right. Okay. So Fiber Fueled by Dr. Will Bolsiewicz. So pseudoscience book. How Not to Age by Michael Greger. So another pseudoscience book. Introduction to Epidemiology. Right. So hypothesis generating theology that can't inform upon anything of any utility in the human nutrition science base. Good. Great. Oh, look at this. Nutritional epidemiology, the telomere effect. Well, yes, we know about telomeres and its association, its relation to aging. Good. Great. Ageless, all this. Yeah. You know what, Chris? You look like you aren't aging at all. Definitely. Yeah. Great. Anyway, so does the amount of books you've read does that confer any credence upon your opinions? Is that commensurate with veracity? No. And also landmark nutrition science studies or whatever he said before I paused the video, same thing there, because the books are just espousing those. They're just mudslinging studies that no one knows how to interpret, apparently, except me, I guess. We can get into them. I hope we get into them. We're not watching this whole video 55 minutes and 30 seconds. Okay, that's not happening. Anyway, just continue. Just continue, Chris.
I can remember. This paper got a lot of buzz among
optimal diet. Okay, so optimal is an opinion, dietary patterns for healthy aging. July 2024, as the global population ages, it is critical to identify diets that, beyond preventing non-communicable diseases, well, you can't inform upon that because prevent is a cause and effect statement, and all the science is predicated upon inferential statistics, which cannot inform upon causality at all, actually. Statistics in general really can't do that. Okay? Optimally promote. So promote is another cause and effect statement. Healthy aging, define that. Here, using longitudinal questionnaire data from the Nurses' Health Study. Good, great, so cool. You used longitudinal epidemiological data that cannot inform upon cause and effect at all, shows weak associations almost always. Even in cohort situations, the differences between the cohorts are extremely low, especially when converting the relative outcome statistics into absolute outcome statistics. They're done on people that are genotypically and phenotypically different from other people. Okay. Therefore, the results cannot be extrapolated to any group not studied at all. It's based on respondent data. People lie, people forget. Okay. Most of these food frequency questionnaires are administered, sometimes once a year. Sometimes I reviewed a study a few months back that did it once every 4 years. Okay. So absolute nonsense. No controlled variables, so healthy user bias, unhealthy user bias. These people are doing different things and also not doing things. All right. Also, the fallacy of the single cause, also known as reductionism. All right. There are many different things that may not even cause the result. There might not even be multiple causes, but multiple influences that actually culminate into a single cause. If there is a single cause, there's so many different reasons as to why the outcomes were seen in these populations, in these studies that were done on these subsets, really, the subset of a population. All right. It's absolutely weak. Extremely weak. This isn't science, it's theology. Science requires experimentation. Okay? Not to mention there's publication bias, and then there's arbitrary selection criteria when it comes to the studies that are included, which studies are included in meta-analyses. Unbelievable. What was the signal to noise ratio as well for the mean of the random variable studied or the random variables studied, assuming normality of the distribution, or in other words, symmetry of the distribution? And if not, what was the median plus or minus MAD? And how did you try and figure out a responsible way to extrapolate that to an entire population? What method? Because the central limit theorem and forming a sampling distribution, sorry, that's not Anyway, you know what? Forget it.
A lot of buzz among scientists and doctors for all the usual reasons.
So what next?
A top-tier journal, a group of authors
Top tier doesn't matter. Appeal to authority.
that included some of the most cited scientists.
So who cares? Okay, so frequency of citation confers credibility, is commensurate with veracity and credibility and integrity. Good. Great. So another fallacy, another appeal to authority fallacy.
Medicine from 5 leading universities.
Oh, you mean Tufts University, the one that had the ranked food sort of chart that put what was it, cereal over red meat and eggs for breakfast in terms of the health rating. Cereal. So another appeal to authority. Good.
Canada, Denmark, and the U.S.
Who cares?
Enormous size, no industry.
Enormous size. Really? Was it enough to be able to extrapolate to the entire population of human beings responsibly? That population changing literally every second because of thousands of deaths and thousands of births. No, and it never will be, okay? It won't. It doesn't matter how many people it was done on. I'm sorry. Was it able to be repeated? And also, what were the limitations? Well, I already laid those out in the beginning, didn't I?
Funding, etc. So naturally, it generated a lot of headlines on medical news.
Right, look, so the healthiest agers, according to whom, on the basis of what, by what criteria? Okay, but let's be forgiving. Let's just say that it was, people that lived the longest without any health issues, okay? Because that's typically what it is. Fine, okay. Followed this diet. No, reported to be following a diet constructed by the researchers, by the way, constructed by the researchers according to certain foods that were most associated with the healthiest agers, according to the reporting or the reported consumption of it, plus or minus a certain standard deviation in terms of the amount, in the people studied or of the people studied. That's what? The fallacy of the single cause, and also the false cause fallacy. Association equals causation in the first place. Logically fallacious right off the bat. Okay, according to a sweeping 30-year longevity study. I don't give a. Okay, so did these people exhibit the same behavior and do the same things for 30 years? What do you think?
And mainstream media. But in the split-screen world we live in, it hardly generated a blip from social media influencers. And studies show social media...
Studies show. Younger generations are more likely to see food and nutrition content on social media and to trust it. Well, no, they're not more likely. You found an incidence rate of people reporting to trust the stuff if they see the nutrition content on social media in a demographic of people. Okay, like when you perform this inferential statistics, which is exactly what all of this is, if you actually learn how to conduct it, you'll realize how noisy all of it is, especially with respect to finding a population proportion, which is what you see here on the screen, 54%. Not just a population mean, a population proportion. Ooh, that's even worse. Yeah, then you have to look at a sampling distribution of a sample proportion and try to draw a confidence interval from that according to a formula. Well, just trying to find the correct sample size to use is tautological in that respect, which just shows how unscientific it really is. But you have to estimate it. You have to estimate the standard deviation around the mean of the sampling distribution of the sample proportion using a standard error for a proportion. And then it just gets real noisy. It really does. And even then, that's you trying to extrapolate to a population that is completely hypothetical and doesn't actually exist. So good. So 54% in that group studied, which is probably a low sample size because of how expensive and impractical it is to perform a large study to find the answer to such a thing.
And studies show social media is where the majority of Americans get their nutrition information.
No, that's not what it showed. It doesn't show that that's where the majority of Americans get their nutrition information. That is an inference made from extremely noisy data. based on assumptions, like a standard error. Okay, Chris?
Oh, how did it shock me?
Oh, God. So, how did it shock me? Well, get the out of here, Chris. Everyone can see through you. Everyone can see through you. You're not fooling anyone. Well, you're fooling a lot of people. You really are. But you're not fooling me.
Count the ways. First, of the 105,000 medical professionals they followed for 30 years, only 9% of them made it to age 70 without at least one chronic disease.
Okay, yep. So that shocked you, Chris? Did it really?
This is deeply personal to me because I celebrated my 55th high school reunion a year ago. I grew up in a small Utah town, mostly Mormon, which means no smoking, no drinking alcohol, and what you would think of as pretty generally good health. But almost 30% of my classmates have already passed away.
The second thing that shocked me is this study produced a heat map of foods most and least likely to get us.
Nope, not most and least likely. It was associated with a lower incidence rate. That is not the same thing, Chris. You cannot inform upon overall probability with this science. Sorry, it's not possible. Unless what you are doing is you are employing this science in an area where the cases that you are studying are identical in characteristics, or at least extremely similar. But if they're not identical, you can't unequivocally inform upon causality, to be fair. But identical in characteristics and are also afflicted or affected, at the very least influenced, by the same amount of confounding variables, the same types, and with those confounding and spurious variables exhibiting the same behavior throughout time. This only works when it's done in a snapshot of time. Okay? This is theological. So, what's next, Chris?
70 without a chronic disease. And way down at the bottom, deep in the red zone, were meats.
Yep, so healthy user bias. What else were they eating? What else were they not eating? Not to mention, are there category errors here that were influenced by the ideological positions of the authors of the study or the scientists themselves? How did they classify red meat? What did they classify under red meat? What was included under those categories of total meats, processed meat, unprocessed red meat? Okay, what else were they eating? What else were they not eating? What else were they doing? What else were they not doing? The science is a load of Chris. We're done.
Sodium, sugary drinks, and desserts. What?
What?
My understanding had always been that red and processed meat is pro-aging, but not.
Oh, wow. Well, okay, so you're basically basing those opinions off of pseudoscience. You really think that you understand anything about science, Chris, and it's hilarious. It's absolutely hilarious that you think that you understand anything about what you talk about. You have no clue, Chris. None. I did a video on you last year, and I wrecked you. And of course, whenever you were confronted about it, what you did is you pretended like my opinions didn't mean anything because, oh, well, he's a kid who's a high school graduate, so I don't give a fuck. In a really bitter fashion, because that's how he actually is. That's how he actually acts and how he feels. This is a way of sort of trying to almost petulantly cope. He tries to pretend like he's this humble figure online. He's not at all. In fact, the people that try and feign this humility the most are the people that are precisely the opposite. Like that they're extremely tribal. They're extremely disdainful. It's hilarious to see Chris trying to act like he's not. And trust me, I mean, I actually have, to be fair, I've conversed with at least one person in particular. You might be watching, good sir, who can verify that from behind the scenes in a personal realm that he's not like that. So, I'll just leave it at that. Let me just leave it at that.
That is ultra-processed food, Your data is telling us it's less likely to get us to 70 healthy?
No, it's not telling you anything. The data is the data, and it's being interpreted by people that want to pretend like it's saying something when it isn't. It's not informing upon probability at all. Okay, you want to get a gauge as to how well it's actually informing upon even a rough probability. See how well it's able to be repeated. Well, you can't because it went on for 30 years. Yeah, exactly. Can't even do it. So it's all just opinions and speculation, isn't it? Nothing wrong with opinions and speculation. What's wrong is asserting the opinions as facts because you said so, because you feel like it.
Cola? If I was a carnivore, I'd want to thoroughly understand this study.
And I do understand the study. But of course, if you don't agree with Chris's opinions, or at least the experts' opinions that Chris listens to, that he deems to be the most veracious, which is sort of a contradiction. He wants to listen to the experts and appeals to authority because he's not one and doesn't understand it, but he gets to choose which ones are actually the correct ones and the ones that you ought to be listening to. Huh, interesting. No, but if you don't arrive at those conclusions, then you don't understand. It must be because you actually don't understand the study. Of course, you just don't understand it. No, I do understand it, Chris. You can form opinions off of it if you want to. Good, great. Don't assert them as fact, like saying more likely and less likely. Okay? It's a bunch of opinions from propaganda outlets. Okay? I mentioned publication bias a little while ago in the beginning of this video here, this enterprise. Publication bias is the phenomenon whereby a scientific journal can be basically provided with 20 studies that were conducted basically the same way, and they get to choose which ones are actually released and which ones aren't. So they can choose to release 3 studies to the public, and the other 17 they can just dismiss entirely. Right. So if those 3 studies support the conclusion that Chris is, supporting and in favor of, well, then it's going to appear that, oh, well, there's 3 whole studies that prove, yeah, okay, relative to what? How many were conducted that show different results? 17 other ones? Yeah, okay. So 3 divided by 20 times 100 for the percentage. Unbelievable, Chris.
I know what you're thinking. How much trust should we put in this study? I'll get to that. But first, more sugars.
Oh, more sugars. More sugars.
Starchy vegetables sandwiched between refined grains and sugar-sweetened beverages. Not a good look. If I was on a diet that promoted eating a lot of starchy vegetables, I would want to thoroughly understand this study.
Right. So let's see if you actually understand it, Chris.
Nuts are way up high. If I was on a diet that discouraged them, I would want to understand this study. Look at oils way up high. If I got my nutrition information from the internet and heard seed oils were poison, I'd definitely want to understand this study.
And we already covered it, Chris. How often were these people eating? How often were they not eating? Okay, did they eat 1 meal a day? What was their mass of food intake? Did that vary? That's another variable that wasn't controlled for. Unbelievable, Chris.
If I were vegan and saw that a health
odds ratio, so no, not an odds ratio. It's not an odds ratio. Okay, what they're doing is they're measuring. So if they're measuring a ratio of any kind, they're looking at an intervention versus control, which wasn't controlled either. Looking at an intervention, and basically they're comparing the incidence in an intervention cohort to a control cohort. And then they're forming a ratio from that, which is effectively a quotient. Okay, alternative healthy eating index for healthy aging criteria. Great. 1.5 to 2.0 seems that the mean was here, plus or minus what these error bars are, hoping that it's a standard deviation and not a standard error. Because if it's a standard error, that is completely irresponsible. It's a standard deviation that you report, not a standard error, because a standard error means that you were trying to extrapolate it to an entire population of human beings with a confidence interval according to a confidence level, according to a sampling distribution of a sample mean and a t-distribution. I understand this very deeply. You better not have reported a standard error for all of these, or else I'm going to be livid. Because let me tell you, if it's a standard error, you can pretty much guarantee, you can guarantee that these actual error bars are way out here. Way farther out. Okay? So a bunch of nonsense from a bunch of observational, it's a bunch of fallacy of the single cause, logical fallacies. Okay?
Vegan diet didn't perform as well as plant-dominant omnivorous diets.
No, that's an opinion. You have no idea if that's true. It could have, but it's the incidence rate. It's not an odds ratio because odds implies probability. It's an incidence rate, which isn't the same thing.
I'd want to understand this study. How could fish be neutral but fat?
Say that again, Chris. Say that you want to understand the study again.
Fried foods be positive? At this point, half of you are thinking,
well, it's not showing that it's positive, Chris. This just goes to show how unscientific this science is. Epidemiology is supposed to be hypothesis generating. In fact, in the name epidemiology, it's designed to track epidemics. That's what it's designed to do. It's hypothesis generating. It has some utility. I'm not pretending otherwise. I'm not saying none of the science should exist. Okay, because in reality, I know that I get a little ahead of myself and I say that human nutrition science is effectively theology. All this is theology. There's a slight difference, and I will admit that. It is science, but it's not experimental science. So it's really hypothesis generating. The problem is pretending like epidemiology is the only hypothesis generating part of that science when it's not. Randomized controlled trials are also effectively, they're opinion generating because they can't inform upon causality. You can't inform upon fact, really. So anyway, okay, continue.
Isn't this just observational epidemiology?
Yes. Yes, Chris. It is. Anyway.
Maybe I should bail from this video right now.
Yes, you shouldn't have ever uploaded it.
But here's the thing. I have a decent background in epidemiology.
Oh, wow. So that must mean he knows exactly what he's talking about. Hey, if you have a good background in epidemiology, tell me how often results are adjusted for via multivariate regression by stacking a bunch of basically errors and upon errors upon errors on top of each other, which inflates the power of the result and can actually turn it entirely 180 degrees backward from what was actually observed. Tell me how often that's done, Chris. So, in other words, fabrication of data, because that's not how science works. Tell me how often that's done if you have a really good background in epidemiology.
If there is one thing I've learned over 50 years, it's do not underestimate epidemiology.
Oh, wow. Oh, you've learned that through experience. Well, this is why it's up for the individual concerned to actually take matters into their own hands and learn this stuff themselves so they realize how nonsensical and unscientific and inane you morons are. Seriously, Chris. Seriously.
Gary Taubes made that mistake when he wrote a popular science article in 1995, casting doubt on epidemiologists' claims that sun lamps increase the risk of melanoma.
Well, it cannot inform upon risk, Chris, because risk is a cause and effect claim. You can't get around it. Okay, Chris? Risk doesn't imply an association. Risk implies causality because it implies probability. Okay? We're done. Yeah, I highly doubt that it can inform upon that because I know for a fact it can't. Okay? Higher alcohol consumption increases breast cancer risk in women. No. It was associated with a higher incidence rate in women studied for the duration of time they were studied. And that was one of many variables that was considered, which was measured via respondent data. That's a proper, responsible reporting of the science. Holy.
Alcohol increases the risk of breast cancer. Radon in wells has a risk for cancer, plus dozens of other claims.
Yes, which he had a right to make I have no idea what he said. You know what? I'm not familiar with the study, was just what I was saying. But Gary Taubes, maybe you and I can have a conversation about this one day so that we can really, exemplify to people how unscientific this science is, because it's not science. Again, this isn't even considering the lack of the strengths of the poor strengths of these associations and the poor differences between cohorts that's observed. Convert the relative outcome statistics into absolute outcome statistics and then multiply that rate by 100 for a 100-year lifespan. And tell me that that value has any utility whatsoever. Oh, wow.
Needless to say, Gary's paper didn't age well at all, and he never...
Neither did you, Chris. And by the way, you know what? I think that it probably did. I think it probably did. See how I use the word the words I think before I say probably, right? Because it's an opinion if I say anything that implies a probability. It's my opinion.
And he never mentions it now.
You pretentious, patronizing. You really think you're slick. You're just a and you know it, Chris. You know it.
I want to know how corporations and social media stars went full science denial on epidemiology.
Wow, science denial. That's what it always comes down to. No, Chris, it's insisting upon the scientific method. It's insisting upon truth. Some of us don't attend the Church of Science every Sunday, okay? And worship science, which is what you're doing, because it can't, you're worshiping theology. You're no different. Okay? Except, well, I'll tell you the difference. This stuff can actually be falsified. It's not true that you can inform upon the probability. I mean, here's another thing. There's another fallacy that's engaged in whenever this stuff is reported. So let's say that you have 1,000 people or 100,000 people, and you measure that there's an incidence rate of there's an increased incidence of about 32%. There's a 32% increased incidence rate of death in a population that is doing something else or reporting to be doing something as compared to another population that isn't reporting to be doing that thing, control group. What they'll often say when they report that is you have a 32% increased risk. Let's just pretend that the study can inform upon risk, can inform upon probability. This is a very classic logical fallacy known as the division fallacy, which is the fallacy, the fallacious idea that what is true of the whole is true of parts. What do I mean by that? Well, just because the study showed a 32% increased risk, assuming that it can inform upon risk, just for the sake of the argument, that doesn't mean that each individual person had a 32% increased risk or a 32% risk. That's not how that works. One person could have 16. And the other person could have had 64% increased risk. It was the aggregate risk. So this is also known as a different name called the ecological fallacy, but I know it by a different name. It's the division fallacy. The opposite of that is also a fallacy. It's called the composition fallacy, which is what is true of parts is true of the whole. So if you can inform upon one person's risk, which is, this person has a 64% increased risk of developing blank, then you could extrapolate that to the entire population. Does that sound like something I've already been criticizing? Inferential statistics, in the area of human nutrition science at least. So inferential statistics is one big composition fallacy. It really is. They try and circumvent that by forming a confidence interval according to, once again, a sampling distribution, according to a standard error, standard error divided by standard deviation of the sample divided by the square root of the sample size, blah, blah, blah. Okay. But it doesn't work because that only applies to a hypothetical population that shares the same characteristics of the people that are in the sample, of the cases in the sample. This is logic. So no, it's not science denial. It's called insisting upon. You're the science denier, Chris. You are the science denier. You are anti-scientific. Moron. You offensive. Frankly, Chris doesn't have the balls to talk to anyone face-to-face about this, by the way. Okay, you know what? It doesn't help that they're probably shrinking and going into his insides, okay, retracting because of how many plants he's consuming. But anyway.
Mostly for money, defending the indefensible, I have an episode for you. In the meantime, the authors...
Unfucking believable. So now you got another pseudoscientific twerp, Peter Attia, a physician who believes that you should be prescribing statins for LDL. Right, metabolic poisons. Okay, good.
Paper are hardly on social media, and I've never seen a social media star interview an epidemiologist or even know anything about epidemiology.
Oh, wow. You know what? I don't know anything about epidemiology. I don't know anything about multivariate regression. I don't know anything about the limitations of epidemiology. I'm the one in the shadows, and I'm the one that doesn't understand that association equals causation. Whenever you feel like it. According to Bradford Hill criteria, an opinion. Like, anyone can make up their own criteria for establishing causality and say, whoa, it fits it, because I said so. Idiot.
Well, actually, there is one epidemiologist with 700,000 followers on Instagram.
Oh, that must mean that he knows what he's talking about. Wow. Great. I don't know many people that have hundreds of millions of followers, or at least tens of millions of followers, and tens of millions of people that they're influencing that don't know what they're talking about at all. I totally don't know anyone that's like that at all. That just gets that following by being sensational and contrarian. Yeah. No. I mean, that's appeal to consensus is not a fallacy. Appeal to popularity, not at all.
Spectre, here's how you know he's good.
So we're going to run through a few items. We'd like you to answer whether you think they are essential or overrated. Kale.
Overrated.
Okay. Kale is contraindicated. Contraindicated! A closer look and revision of mainstream health axioms that have perpetuated illness, disorder, and disease for over a century. Buy that book if you haven't already. Link in the description below for second edition in paperback, hardcover, ebook, and self-narrated audiobook, because I'm all about authenticity. They're contraindicated for human consumption. Okay, they are a deviation that is quite stark away from what our genes are most genotypically evolved to withstand, according to the Darwinian principles of evolution, and therefore the subsequent principles of indication. Okay, they're also, it's not essential at all. Okay, it has a bunch of fiber, which seems to be an enteric nervous system destroying compound. Everyone wants to tout the benefits of fiber because, oh, well, it increases mucus secretion. Yeah, last I checked, if something increases the rate at which a cell or, a set of cells increases the secretion of mucus, that's under circumstances wherein or whereby the cell concerned or the set of cells concerned is irritated. And that's exactly what fiber does. It abrades the interior lining. We can't digest it. We don't have the digestive tract. We don't have the digestive system to be able to even digest fiber in the first place, and utilize it effectively. So there you go.
Dark chocolate.
Essential.
No, not essential. Not at all. Okay, so now you're using the word essential as if it's required. It's not required at all. So that word can only be applied via objective measurements and observations, not subjective ones. I can't just say that something is essential to have for life because I said so. No, something is or is not essential according to the definition of essential. All right, so what definition of essential are you referring to? Essential for life? Nope. Essential for good health? Nope. No evidence to support that claim. Also, what kind of dark chocolate? All dark chocolate? Give me a break.
Any epidemiologist who ranks dark chocolate high is clearly a genius.
Wow. Yes, they're clearly a genius. According to whom, Chris? You? Again, just because he said so.
Clearly, it's a serious flaw in the paper we're talking about now that there's no row in the heat map for dark chocolate.
Maybe because it wasn't inquired about. Remember when I said, what did they not eat? And what did they eat that wasn't included? Holy shit, Chris. This is unbelievable.
I fixed it for them.
Oh my God, what an insufferable this guy is. This is unbelievable. Seriously. People watch this shit. I mean, seriously, we're not kindergartners. I just dealt with this weeks ago with plant-based orthopedic surgeons, with this physician who was talking to us like children. I mean, they seriously should be on Sesame Street.
Sorry, Twix.
Twix bars.
Hang on one sec. Hi, honey. Can you throw away that second half of the Twix bar? Thank you. I love you too.
And I think, you know what? Chris should join them. You should join them, Chris. Seriously. Trainers who say last one are the reason I have trust issues.
One of the reasons Tim is so popular on Instagram is he knows not to talk about epidemiology on Instagram. But seriously, Chris, you say you can't make the outrageous claim that red meat lowers our life expectancy more than any ultra-processed food.
You can't, because lower is a cause and effect statement, Chris. We're done.
Based on one paper, no matter how good it is. And you would be right about that. So I give you the recent papers from Lars Fodnes from University.
Life expectancy gains from dietary modifications, a comparative modeling study in 7 countries. Oh my gosh. More that isn't science.
Bergen, who collaborates with researchers in Australia and the UK and publishes in top journals. They calculate how many extra years of life you gain with changes to your diet.
That's not what they assess and observe. They measure a comparison in incidence rates. Gain is a cause and effect statement. That is saying that, oh, well, if these people do this thing, or if these people don't do this thing, then that causes them to gain life. Then they gain life. No. It was associated with a longer lifespan in people that were genotypically and phenotypically different from the control group or the intervention group, depending on what group you're actually assessing.
Tapped into really big databases in different...
I don't care how big the database is. That has no bearing on the integrity of the results, or rather the reporting of the results, because the results are just the results.
And they found the changes depend on both your country's average diet and your age.
No, not even that. The study didn't prove that. That is another opinion. What the study saw, or what these comparisons saw, was that if you conducted the study on different populations, you found different associations. That's what it showed. It doesn't mean it depends on the country, because that's, again, drawing a causal inference.
In the UK, you can get up...
Life expectancy can increase. Nope. Whatever it says afterwards. Done. We're done. Write it off. Not what it informed upon. Life expectancy can increase by up to 10 years following sustained shifts towards healthier diets, according to whom on the basis of what? According to whom on the basis of what? Maybe that should be a shirt. I have other shirts. Association doesn't equal causation. And also indicated as indicated AF. Link in the description below for those if you haven't bought yours already. What are you doing if you haven't? Because then whenever you're arguing with someone and they try to pretend like an association equals a causation, you could just wear that shirt and just point to it.
10 more years of life with simple dietary changes, even more in the US. They made a very pretty chart.
All right, very pretty chart. Great. So that must mean it's great because, oh, it's so pretty. Give me a break. Optimal diet. Good. All right, so what do we got here? Age at diet change. 20, 30, 40, okay. Increase in life expectancy by what? 0.0, 0.5. What is it? What is the figure? What is the number? Half a year? I would suspect that it's not in a per year basis. That's a little off to me. That doesn't seem right. So let's see here. Age at diet change, 60. And this line corresponds to what? Added oils or something? So if the people were 30 and they did so if they were 30 and they did all these things listed up here, then this was the change in life expectancy. Right. Okay. So their life expectancy was right there in the 20s, and then it just went down and down and down. For example, this one is what? Increase in legumes or something? I don't know what line corresponds to what. They try and color code them, but they're so thin up here, I don't know. Either way, I mean, I'm trying to entertain it as much as possible, but it doesn't really inform upon what he thinks it informs upon. It doesn't show that certain foods, reducing or increasing them, increases or even changes life expectancy causally at all, even influences it. I believe it does, because food is quite intimate when it comes to the effects it has on our genes, and therefore telomere length and all that stuff, and also rate of cell division, which influences telomere length. But I mean, whatever. So added oils, great. So it seems that it changed depending on the age they started. It was different. Good. Cool. Who gives a f***? This doesn't inform upon literally anything at all. Because I think we already covered it. Wow.
The younger you are when you start eating healthy after the...
Healthy according to whom, on the basis of what? Shouldn't be striving to eat healthy or to live healthily per se, because that would require you to try and find studies that inform upon things that are healthy and things that are not, which isn't possible to do. You should be living an indicated lifestyle, which is characterized by what is most congruous, or the best approximation that is most congruous given our modern context, with what our genes overall across our genome, from every hard and soft inference that we actually have of any utility through objective interpretation of those inferences, most evolved genotypically withstand, to a degree that caused full genotypic adaptations towards the food and towards the lifestyle approach. Yes, there is such a thing as antagonistic pleiotropy. We understand that. Now, provide any evidence that a carnivorous approach is in any way antagonistic, or really resulted in antagonistic pleiotropy, is a function of it. Okay? Because that's not possible to do either. It's just your opinion. Try and find some inferences that are even strong in the first place, even if they can't inform upon causality. That'll be fun to watch you desperately try to do that.
Faster your diet probably was as a teen, the more years you get to live.
That's not true. That's not what it informs upon at all. Moron. Right, okay, so that's what he's saying. So if you started it at 20, then here's your change in life expectancy. So if you did this at 20, no change. Did this at 20, no, some change. This at 20, some change. This at 20, some change. This, and then blah, blah, right up there.
Spent hours struggling to understand this chart, so I simplified it for you.
Okay, age at diet change, 20. Increase in life expectancy. All right, so nuts, whole grains, and legumes. So legumes and whole grains and nuts. Cool. So still, once again, it didn't inform upon this at all. This is theology, and this is your opinion.
3 lines show how many years you gain if you add roughly 250 more calories of beans.
Oh my God. Wow. First of all, 250 plus or minus what? According to what? Respondent data. So even more noisy. So you've got now every random variable can be conceptualized as a random probability distribution. And every single one of them multiplies. They don't add together, they multiply. So there's some error around how it was how it was collected. Okay. Then there's error on the standard deviation in the first place. Okay. So like what was the variation? What was the spread? Just the dispersion, plus or minus what? Not to mention, Chris, there are no calories in food. And this is not some sort of, ambiguity fallacy or something like that, where I'm being purposely misleading with my language. Because I understand what people might think in response to that. Well, Eddie, okay, technically there's no calories in food, but that's not the point. It's supposed to show you how many calories you actually yield from the food when you digest it. Oh, that's really what it is. Except you don't yield calories whenever you digest food. What happens is you consume mass in the forms of carbohydrates, proteins, fats, and alcohol, chemically interact those substances under controlled molecular oxygen. They react in such a way so as to alter the positioning of the chemical bonds. And then, since those reactions are exothermic, some heat, photons of light, calories, are released, sure, but they are not used in metabolic processes at all. 70% of it is actually released to entropy, creating body heat. Okay, which just shows you the vast inefficiency actually of the human body, and the minority of which is encapsulated in the form of ADP and PI to form ATP through substrate level phosphorylation. Okay, so some of it is used, and you could say, oh, well, that just goes to show right there, Eddie. That just goes to show. It all has to do with calories still. It's a proxy measure. No, because how many of those calories, quote unquote, are you actually absorbing? Look, the calorie number on food labels is out by plus or minus 20%, by the way. That's another error I didn't even consider. When they're reporting the amount of calories, there's already an error around that calorie number. That's a third assumption. Error cubed. Error cubed, though, assumes that every single one of those errors is identical. You can't cube something that isn't identical to itself. So really, it's X. It's assumption X times assumption Y times assumption Z. All right. So there's another one, plus or minus 20%, because you can't actually measure energy. You can only estimate it. It's the amount of calories that would be yielded, again, plus or minus 20%, if you rapidly combusted the food in a bomb calorimeter via a massive electrical current. Wow, that's totally what the body does with food. We're totally not an open thermodynamic system, so we actually allow for the flow of mass in and out of the system as well as the flow of energy in and out of the system. Okay, so whenever they combust that food that may have fiber in it, well, fiber is incorporated into the calorie number, isn't it? Well, you don't absorb fiber. So that's a little noisy, isn't it? Can't control for that, huh? How much protein is actually providing you with calories, and how much of it is actually being used to synthesize bodily structures, which is like the primary purpose of protein in the first place. Unbelievable, Chris.
Or nuts. Reducing red and processed meat consumption by the same amount of calories also makes a big difference.
Not calories at all. There's 0 calories. Okay? You're not using calories in metabolism. We have an electron transport chain, and electrons come from mass, and they also have mass themselves. 1,836th of a proton, actually. And you know what, Chris? Let me tell you something else. Do you actually understand how these things interact with each other? Fat and carbohydrates together? You ever heard of the Randall cycle? Okay, I can imagine Chris doing a video on me. I can just imagine the response to that, where he takes that clip and he pauses and he goes, the good old Randall cycle. Discovered by Philip John Randall in 1963. This is quite interesting, actually. I'm not someone that fully understands this, so I decided to take it up with an expert that actually can decipher these esoteric claims contained in the paper. Off, Chris.
Expectancy. Reducing sugar-sweetened drinks and refined grains also helps a lot, but not as much as reducing meat. This obviously...
No, that is your opinion. It didn't inform upon what helped and what didn't help. You are merely observing you're observing mere associations, Chris.
Depends on your weight, your activity level, and
in your opinion,
you're probably eating in the country you live. So they built a calculator so you can get as detailed as you want.
Right. So again, a calculator based on a bunch of assumptions that compound. Okay? Learn basic statistics. I'm serious. Learn it.
I'll link it in the description. They have sliders to change the amount of grams for the big food groups. I didn't play much with fruits and veggies because everything about them varies so much, and a slider for grams consumed seemed to not be as relevant for them. In any case, the output looks like this with error bars.
Yes, with error bars. Good. See how massive these error bars are? See how massive that is? Now, granted, relatively speaking, I mean, if you're looking at the actual variable concerned, life years gained as the x-axis, which is apparently that's odd. They put it as the x-axis when the x-axis is supposed to be the independent variable, but in this case, it would be the dependent variable because it's life years gained. But okay. Anyway, if you look, the very end of this one, 1.53, well, it's between 0.75 and, well, actually, no, it's still pretty vast, and between 2.25 and 2.5. But, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, how much is that? But, this is what happens whenever you let theology get to your head. Okay? Learn epistemology, learn logic, learn even just basic rudimentary elements of philosophy, like what truth is, and you'll realize very quickly, this is a bunch of this is bread and circuses. This is an example of man planning and God laughing.
This example was similar to the chart I showed for a typical American diet and a 20-year-old. Cutting red and processed meat, adding beans, nuts, and whole grains were the things that had the biggest impact.
No, impact is a cause. No, you see how I just predict every single thing that comes out of this charlatan's mouth? It's pretty easy once you know how they think. It's pretty damn easy once you understand how they think. This is absolute nonsense. Seriously.
Although when I moved the vegetable slider to the right, that seemed to make a dramatic difference too. Note the estimates varied widely for some foods like legumes, but not much at all for red and processed meat. Those were consistently bad. So why?
As characterized by whom? As classified by whom? Red meat according to whom, on the basis of what? Okay? Were hot dogs with buns characterized as red meat? And a bunch of condiments on it? Was pizza considered red meat? I've seen that before. Were burgers considered red meat?
Do so few people know about this? I think it's because the story from virtually everyone who wrote articles about these papers was what we've heard 1,000 times before. Eat your fruits and veggies, kids.
Don't do that, because fruits and vegetables are contraindicated for human consumption. According to the Darwinian principles of evolution, from every single inference we have, how often did we encounter simple carbohydrates in nature? Seriously, how often do we do that? Rarely, even during fruit season, by the way. Same goes for fiber. Same goes for all the vegetables you eat, Chris. And I don't really like the word vegetables because it's a culinary term, and therefore it lends credence to the idea that we should be consuming plants. It's plants and then the fruit of the plants. That's really what we should be saying. Okay?
Stop with the soda. They often mention eating less red meat, but I haven't heard anyone mention that it's worse than soda or donuts.
Well, it doesn't matter whether you've heard it or not. The study can't inform upon that at all. The science itself that you're referring to can't inform upon that at all. Okay?
My heart skipped a beat when Eric Topol, who is a solid cardiologist and researcher with a solid new book, Super Agers, wrote a Substack for the Dietary Patterns of Healthy Aging paper this video is based on. But he told the same basic story as the...
So the Association for the Worst Food for Healthy Aging were trans fats with an odds ration. of 0.52. Right. So it's a hazard ratio, as they like to call it. It's really an incidence ratio. That's really what we're referring to. They took the intervention group incidence and then divided it by the control group incidence of death. In reality, they probably actually did the opposite, because if you did that and there were more deaths in the trans fats group, or at least, more incidents of unhealthy aging is really what we should be saying, because that was the primary outcome statistic. If there were more incidents in the control group than, or in the intervention group than the control group, then actually it would be over 1, not below 1. So it would have to be some sort of antithesis or negation of that. So it was either him comparing control to intervention, or the metrics were different, where it was less incidence of healthy aging in the intervention group compared to more incidence of healthy aging in the control group. Either way. So basically what that shows is that it was half of the people, half of the incidence of healthy aging happened in the intervention group that had the highest consumption of trans fats or something, most significant variable compared to all the others that were considered or studied. You see how unscientific this is? I mean, genuinely. I'm going to keep hammering that notion in because it's a correct notion. Unbelievable. And then look, about half as likely. No. In contrast, the best food associations were fruit, monounsaturated fats, whole grains, and vegetables with close to doubling the odds of a healthy aging. No, not odds. They were associated with double the incidence of healthy aging according to the criteria that would consider someone aging healthfully or healthily.
It did, without calling out meat for keeping company with sodium and trans fat at the very bottom of the heat map. But he put...
Sodium is an essential mineral, and also its associations in the first place with disease vary depending on where the sodium comes from, and also what is being consumed with the sodium. So actually the same thing. For example, salt-sensitive hypertension seems to actually be mediated by the level of insulin in the bloodstream, because insulin is a hormone that causes the kidneys to take up more sodium. So that increases blood volume because of, osmosis and all that stuff. And there you have high blood pressure. Okay. Do you realize that the majority of the sodium in Americans' diets, it seems, so to employ this science, because in this situation, it's the best you got. But I believe it. See, I form opinions off of it. I don't assert them as fact. It seems that the majority of sodium from Americans' diets don't come from real sort of what people consider whole foods. They come from bread and rolls. I wrote about this in my book, Contrainidicated. You should read it, Chris. You read a lot of books. So go ahead and read it. Why don't you?
My buttons by saying your mileage may vary, kids, because this study was based on observational data.
There you go. Done. We're done, Chris. It can't establish anything as fact.
After working in environmental epidemiology, where we rarely have data sets as big, long, and carefully collected as the Harvard study this paper is based on,
it doesn't matter how long the study was conducted, how many people there were, was it controlled for or was it not? Because if it wasn't, get You do not understand science at all, Chris. You don't understand it whatsoever. It's clear. It's clear.
I run out on the street and scream when I hear somebody say long-term observational studies are weak sauce when they don't fully understand them.
Well, this should be a refresher for you. I do understand it. I also understand the limitations, Chris, which is more important.
All companies whose...
Oh my God. Chris, we are adults. Okay? Are you?
were threatened by epidemiology have tried to discredit it and the scientists behind it with the most expensive lawyers, and they've lost in court.
Who gives a flying Chris? Right, so if you lose a court dispute, you must be wrong. Right. It's one of the most basic, fundamental ideas of statistics, actually, if you're actually taught it properly, is that just because someone is considered not guilty, effectively, it doesn't mean they are not guilty. It means there wasn't enough evidence to falsify or to support the idea that they were guilty by the prosecutor. Same thing here. Same thing here. You're going to tell us that if you lose a court case, then you're wrong?
Industry is fighting it with a huge, expensive disinformation campaign that includes a big budget to pay popular influencers under the table.
Yep, and that doesn't happen with plant-based corporations or corporations that support that agenda? Not at all? Not even a little bit? Do you think that we base our opinions based off what the beef industry tells us is safe and unsafe? You think I give a flying what they have to say about anything?
Was positive about this study in his Substack, but had some specific criticisms about epidemiology. One was, medical research is best when there's a specific prospective hypothesis being tested, not when a large data set is being extrapolated for a question thought up along the way.
So another opinion. All of this sucks. All of it. Also, by the way, just taking this objectively, though, that's how literally all science is supposed to be done. This is like saying, you know, it's best whenever we go outside and before we conduct a study, have a hypothesis that we objectively test instead of seeing how the study goes along the way and then coming up with our hypothesis. No conflict of interest?
That is not how long-term observational studies usually work.
Well, it doesn't matter, does it? Does it have any bearing on the utility of the science itself and what it can and can't inform upon?
Best when you measure everything you can for as many people as you can for as long as you can.
Well, that is true. It is true. That is how, that is the best epidemiology you're going to do. It doesn't mean that it doesn't have those limitations still, Chris, because it does.
Like the Framingham study has done for more than 75 years. I visited the Framingham campus and interviewed their scientists about that very thing.
Man, given the state of current affairs, he should probably be censoring the way he pronounces scientists. If you catch my drift. I'm going to get like taken down or something.
This paper is based largely on the Harvard nurses cohort, and I asked an actual epidemiologist about this.
One of the big questions that the nurses' health study was able to answer was trans fat with long-term heart disease. And it was certainly not designed to answer that question. But this is sort of one of the big advantages of existing cohorts. You can go back and as new hypotheses emerge, if you can in some way have measured that exposure, which they were able to do because they had all this diet data. Now you could look at a new exposure with existing data and already, 10 and then 20, 30 years of follow-up. And so the signal between consumers of high trans fat versus low trans fat, and we're only talking the difference between a couple of grams per day.
Reported.
5 grams versus, 2 or 3 grams.
It's amazing.
Yeah. The risk of heart.
Not risk. Done. Just waiting for her to just go off the off the rails here. Get errant immediately. Not risk. Wow. Were the sources the same? Were all of these other people's eating habits the same? Their lifestyles the same? Get the out of here. Sorry, ma'am.
Disease was so much higher. That was replicated.
Well, you want to talk about the etiology of heart disease? Read my book. Because we talk about the actual etiology of heart disease, the hemodynamics of heart disease. Heart disease, to be extremely, accurate, broad, but accurate enough still. Heart disease is caused by living a lifestyle that deviates too strongly and too starkly away from what our genes are most evolved to genotypically withstand. It is undergirded by inflammation. It is the common denominator. It is caused by damage to the arteries. Done.
A number of other cohorts.
True confession. When I was reading Dr. Topol's book on aging, I would wince a little when he wrote about epidemiology. And I wished he had a co-author who was an epidemiologist who was involved in long-term studies.
What were his criticisms, Chris? What were his criticisms? I'd love to review them.
In my opinion, it was a blemish on an otherwise good book. And my fantasies. I wish.
Oh my God. The patronizing attitude of this charlatan, this imbecilic, inane, obsequious charlatan.
That everyone who wrote a book on human health that touched on nutrition would read a book on nutritional epidemiology.
We already covered it. Instead of reading a book about it, why don't you learn statistics? What you're referring to is descriptive statistics. And then what they do is they try and extrapolate it. They try and extrapolate the results non-mathematically, just with their opinions, to the entirety of the human population, which is not the same thing as inferential statistics. Inferential statistics is using things like the central limit theorem and confidence intervals and a sampling distribution of a sample proportion or a sample mean, and all that stuff, and forming a confidence interval and all that. Okay, that is inferential statistics. I know that too. Descriptive statistics is a lot more simple than that. It's easy to understand. Could probably teach it in one damn module.
The most respected one was written by Walter Willett, who...
Okay, so another appeal to basically popularity and or authority. When you say respected, doesn't matter how many people respect it. Is it right or wrong?
Pivotal figure in uncovering the health harms of trans fats and getting them banned. He's the most cited scientist.
Yep, and this is exactly why it is extremely dangerous to be pretending like this science can inform upon causality. Because if the same associations were found with reported red meat consumption, however that was measured and however that was characterized, if those were found, then that would give the government the authority to ban red meat, wouldn't it? Wouldn't it? Really gets you thinking, doesn't it?
World and a co-author of this paper. And I think if they're going to write...
Oh, well, Chris thinks. Oh, I love you, Chris. Oh, you're so humble.
Substack on a landmark paper like this critiquing the epidemiology, and they're not epidemiologists, they should talk to one of the authors.
Oh, wow. So if you're not an epidemiologist, you can't criticize epidemiologists. No respect to whether or not you actually understand epidemiology, even if you're not an epidemiologist. Nope, doesn't matter. If you never got that administered credence conferred upon you by an institution, get looking down your. They look down their noses at you. Keep that in mind. How does that make you feel?
Punk. You've been flapping your lips about this paper and popping off about Dr. Topol not talking to an author of the paper, but I haven't seen you do it.
Well, hi, Feng Lei. Good to meet you
hi.
in person at last.
Yeah.
So tell me about your background.
Okay. So currently I'm a research associate in the Department of Nutrition at Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health. And I graduated here in 2021 and got my PhD degree in nutritional epidemiology. I was promoted to research associate last year.
Dr. Feng Lei is the second author of this paper. The first author, Anne Julie Tessier, is on maternity leave. So let's ask Feng Lei the hard questions that shocked me from this paper. Epidemiology is very quantitative, so there is a number for just about everything. Exactly the opposite of the emotional anecdotes that fuel the internet. If you read a textbook...
Anecdotes, Chris, are really the only thing that we have. An anecdote is no different from someone that you encounter in your real life telling you an experience they had doing something that they believe to be causally associated and saying, hey, maybe it'll work for you too. Who knows? It's no different. People like to believe that given our scientific era, we don't merely operate under trial and error with certain interventions. And that is a fundamentally false idea. We still depend on the most archaic way of determining what is true and what is false, which is trial and error, what works and what doesn't. Always. What we do is we manipulate ourselves into thinking that we can perform these studies and that it can inform upon, it can make us more certain. It can give us more information about whether or not it will work. And I mean, depending on the science you're talking about, sure. If it's experimental science, then yes. If it's not, different story. And this isn't experimental science. And so it's all just trial and error. So when it comes to an area of science that isn't science at all, you can pretty much guarantee that anecdotes are really going to be your best bet. You don't want to transgress into believing that if someone says an anecdote, then it must be true. Because once again, this goes back to the composition fallacy. What is true for one person is true for the whole. That's a fallacy. It's not always the case. But what I'm saying is that they're the most, I mean, it's no different really than a case study, is it? Informing opinions off of a case study. There you go. Like that's, it's silly to just disregard anecdotes. Okay. It's not to say that an anecdote is representative of what's going to happen to everybody. Again, that would be a composition fallacy, but it may or may not. There we go. See, responsible reporting. All right. Frankly, it's better than this science. It really is.
If you read a textbook like this one from Tim Lash, you find out quickly you need a master's degree in statistics to follow along.
Ah, there you go. Statistics. See, the thing is that the amount of statistics that I know is not nearly as much as I will know very soon. Really all you need to understand is basic statistics to actually understand how silly and stupid and uninformative this field of science is when applied to human nutrition.
And that is why I recommend this one from Walter Willett, because you can understand it without the math.
Well, that probably indicates that it doesn't go into enough detail at all. Okay.
I did want to understand some numbers, like how they scored different dietary patterns without having you run into the street screaming about math. And Feng Lei obliged. I'll be back on the other side of this interview with my wrap-up. Did you get your undergraduate degree in China? Or?
Oh yeah, I got my undergraduate degree and also master degree in China about food science. And now here I came to study nutrition.
Did you have to learn a lot of statistics as part of your nutritional epidemiology?
Yeah, of course, yeah. And I also have a master degree of biostatistics here.
How did this team come together? What is it, 8 scientists from 5 universities across 3 countries?
8 what?
That seems like a wildly diverse team.
I'm being stupid, but
that come together.
That's a very great observation when reading this paper. So the nutrition department at our school has trained many nutrition researchers, and they often continue to collaborate after they move on to new institutions.
To me, it's one of the most fascinating nutritional papers I've ever seen for so many reasons. Your cohorts are so big and you followed them for so many years. And the other thing is you did those heat maps where you show what foods are likely to get you to 70 and which...
No, not likely. Just waiting for more just errant reporting of data. Not likely.
...are less likely.
Nope.
The heat maps are fantastic, and they're broken down by the chronic disease that you may face. Whose brainchild was all these heat maps?
For the heat map, first we have different foods, and we also have different outcome. Our primary outcome here is a healthy aging. For people to be healthy aging in our study, and the participants need to be survived to age of 70, and they also need to be free of 11 major chronic disease. So for the healthy aging, we have 5 components. And we built this concept.
Here's another question. Were they required to actually be analyzed by their doctors? Or was this also based on respondent data? Do you have coronary artery disease? Do you have congestive heart failure? Do you have stroke? Do you have kidney failure? I'm not sure, because this gets into a clear lack of experience in actually conducting the science. I could probably search that up, but I don't have the energy to do that now. But it would, if they weren't required to see their doctor for it, then that's going to add some more limitation there.
So from John Rowe and Robert Kahn back in 1997. So they defined successful aging, which has 3 elements: low probability of disease, good physical and cognitive health, and also social health. So we adapted their concept to develop our own concept of healthy aging. Now the 5 components.
Right. Good. So it was arbitrary selection criteria. May I ask if your aging rate and the way that the effects of aging manifest in you yourself is dependent on genotype and phenotype? The phenotype not only being impacted by diet, but also many other things?
It's a little bit shocking because out of your cohort, only 9 or 10% made it to 70 without a major chronic disease. It's not easy to get to 70 without a chronic disease. And these are...
Well, Chris, my suggestion would be to live an indicated lifestyle. A species-appropriate, species-specific one, to avoid that.
Professionals, right?
Yeah. I think it would be relatively easier to live longer. Like, it's easier to live longer than 70, but it might be hard to live without disease. Also need to be maintaining good health, good physical function, mental health, and cognitive function. This might be hard, yeah.
So can you talk about your cohort a little bit? Nursing.
Well, it's more difficult to do it whenever you're not eating appropriately for your species, because every single species has an appropriate diet, one diet for its species. Okay, that's the beauty of trying to figure out what's indicated for our species. A lot of people will say, "Oh, well, Eddie, what you always complain about science not being science because, well, there's differences in genotype and phenotype, but you say that there's only one diet for human beings when every single human being has a different genotype." Well, great question as to why I do that. The answer is, well, you know what? I'll answer your question with a question. Does a species-appropriate, species-specific diet discriminate based on genotype? No, it doesn't. So you don't even have to worry about it. It already is controlled.
Health professionals?
Yeah, sure. So our main cohort is from the Nurses Health Study 1 and Health Professional Follow-up Study. The Nurses Health Study 1 NHS was established in 1976. At that time, we recruited the registered nurses in our cohort. At that time, they are kind of middle-aged, and now we follow them for almost 50 years. And for Health Professional Follow-up Study, HPFS, was established in 1989, and that was only for male health professionals.
Can you explain the origin of the EDIP score?
Yeah. So EDIP stands for Empirical Dietary Index for Pro-Inflammatory. So this, unlike the other scores like AHEI, AMED, these scores are based on our previous hypothesis of the benefits of the food. But for EDIP, this score was derived based on a disease mechanisms, the inflammation. So as we know, the chronic inflammation is a large contributor to many chronic disease. So here...
Well, usually it's the common denominator and is often a symptom. It can become a subsequent cause, causing a positive feedback loop. Sure, but...
we use the EDIP, which is capturing how the food is promoting the inflammation. And by using this score, we can have the biological process linking the food that we eat and the risk of disease.
Not risk. Okay, you know what? I'm done. We're not saying anything new at all. It's a waste of time. I'm done. 16 minutes and 40 seconds into this video. Why is this video 55 and a half minutes long? There is no reason for this video to be that long at all. Anyway, trying to use the science to inform upon what we ought to be eating and what we ought not to be eating and how we ought to be living and how we ought not to be living, it's a complete waste of time. It does not inform upon anything of utility whatsoever. The associations are extremely weak almost always. The repeatability is either not able to even be informed upon because of how long the studies go on for in a situation like that, or they're not able to be repeated whenever they are conducted. Okay? And by the way, even if they were, it's an association and not a causal relationship with multiple, myriad confounding variables not controlled for. Complete waste of time. You should be eating a species-appropriate, species-specific diet, that being a carnivorous diet primarily consisting of the flesh and associated fat of large ruminant animals, with added fat because we're looking at a best approximation, giving our modern context. Added fat in the forms of butter, tallow, lard, soy, and ghee, added salt to taste, and water. Transitioning to that diet appropriately, prudently, over the course of 6 to 8 weeks, with each week lowering your consumption of the foods that you currently eat and raising your consumption proportionally of the foods that I just listed that you ought to be eating, according to the Darwinian principles of evolution, chemical anthropology, observational paleoanthropology, comparative anatomy, and some elements of biochemistry, frankly. So, with that being said, if you enjoyed the video, leave a like. Subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed yet. I don't really know what you're doing. Get down there and subscribe. Leave your thoughts in the comment section below. Of course, I do read your comments. I do. And also, once again, buy my book, Contrainidicated, if you have not bought that book already. And subscribe to the Patreon as well, if you haven't already, to gain access to 1 week early uploads, ad-free content, uncensored content, exclusive Patreon videos. Back when I used to do that every week, I would record a separate new Patreon exclusive video, and also very antiquated videos from before my channel was even public. There's quite a few of those, as well as an exclusive Discord server for Tier 3 members. And finally, the link on the bottom of the screen, what is that link? Well, that is a link that will bring you to an amazing site with amazing products from an amazing brand known as Cerule. If you purchase product through that link, you will get a permanent percentage discount and permanent free shipping when signing up for monthly deliveries. And if you email me behind the scenes at edgoki@pm.me, I can tell you how to earn those products for free, because who in their right mind wouldn't want that? But of course, before buying any product from anybody at all, I would never recommend buying one at all unless you actually know about the products first. So fortunately for you, I have a video linked in the top right corner of the screen, which is a video elucidation of what these products are, who should take them, why you should take them, when to take them, etc., etc. And I would also further migrate to the description below to find a video that I did on these products in further detail, as well as the company of Cerule itself, which I think is incredibly important if you're willing to make a contribution towards the company with a purchase. So, with that being said, join me next time when we are reacting to more pretentious feigned humility from Chris MacAskill. Nobody does it better than Chris MacAskill. So, till then.